Let's call the meeting to order of the Pownal Planning Commission. The date is what? August 20th, 2019. Starting at 7 o'clock. Before I ask everybody here to introduce themselves to the camera, I'm going to read the agenda for this evening. Our guest tonight, our working guest tonight, the director of the BCRC, Jim Sullivan. The agenda is the following: approval of this agenda. Number 2, approval of the regular meeting minutes of July 16th, 2019. And then we'll begin work on review of the zoning bylaws, section 5. We'll take any public comment if any of the public shows. And other than that, that's pretty much it. So I'll ask for a motion to approve the agenda for tonight.
So moved.
All right, we have three motions. We'll take Barbara's. Okay, take Barbara's. Okay, good motion. Is there a
I'll second.
There's a second. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, could we, and I know that we love doing this, could we start with Michelle? Would you mind telling everybody in the viewing audience who you are, please?
Michelle Peckrell.
Go ahead, Jim, we'll go your way.
Okay.
Sorry.
My name's Jim Sullivan. I'm the with the Bennington County Regional Commission.
Ron Bizon, planning.
John Bashir.
Mike Slattery?
Jessica Witherell.
Jim Winchester?
Megan Randall. Barbara Trueweber. Rosemary Pelletier.
Thank you all. Okay, let's take a look in your packet at the minutes from the last meeting. I think that we had a copy of these 3 or 4 weeks ago, if I recall. I think I've seen them before, so I don't know if everybody else did, but they're kind of detailed. So take a look. I'll give you all a few minutes, and then when I see a few people look up, I'll ask for a motion to approve them. This is literally summarizing everything Jim talked about. What's that? Extremely thorough. Need more time? Get tired putting these together?
Pretty good stuff.
There was.
Motion to approve the minutes of Tuesday, July 16th, 2019, or do we need more time?
Say so moved.
We have a motion. I have a second. I have a second, Mr. Winchester. Any more discussion?
I'm trying to scan it. The content is fine. It's perfect. I remember reading it off the computer, and there was a phrase that was repeated twice, like 3 words that were said again, and I don't find them now, so I don't know. But it was like a typo kind of thing.
Oh.
And I'm scanning to see.
Oh,
them.
when you first
when
reviewed them on the
When I first reviewed them
computer.
on the computer.
Oh, okay.
I saw a short phrase that was just redundant. It was said and then the same 3 words were repeated, but I can't find it now.
Probably caught it.
So I would
maybe did
just,
a grammar check or a spell check. I'm not
Oh.
quite sure.
okay, maybe I heard it, saw an earlier version.
Would it
No, it was the
have
one you sent
impacted
me. No,
the
not the
content
content at all,
of it?
not at all. The content
Okay.
is fine.
Okay.
Matter of fact, I think it's amazing.
I do too.
Yeah.
Good job. All right, we have a motion, we have a second. Any other discussion? If none, all those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, Mr. Sullivan, let's talk about section 5.
Okay, do you want me to run back through and highlight really quickly the changes to section 4? Just, that we made after the last meeting?
Oh, sure, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah. Because
That's in the new draft that you sent, right?
Right, so yeah, I sent 2 documents out. One is the draft as we're building it, as we're going along, and the other one is my review notes on the next section to discuss. So I sent out 1 through 4, and then there's a little bit of section 8 as sections get moved around. And this is the section on administration that we talked about at the last meeting, the second half of the last meeting, and I will just hit the real high points, and please, there's always just question. None of this stuff is set in stone.
Okay.
Until,
Right, that's right.
We get through.
Yep.
We get through everything and have a final review. So make your
Yeah.
notes. On page 10 of this document, the draft 7/26/2019 is the one I'm looking at. Does everybody have one of those?
Well, so I
Say
have,
again.
So the draft at the top, it says 7/26/2019.
absolutely, and 10 down in the lower right-hand
Yeah,
corner.
10 in the lower right hand corner,
Yep.
which is like the second page of section 4. We just added a couple of things at the top, paragraphs or items F and G for
Right.
responsibilities of the Development Review Board.
Yep.
And let's see, the next
Copy we have.
significant change. I mean, I'm
was in
gonna
the computer.
skip
It said
over
7/26.
things that are basically just.
E in 4.2.1.4.
Yeah, that was again. That's just required application materials, and that just indicates that if you're applying for something that has to go to the DRB, then you need to meet the site plan or conditional use. The things that are listed for those.
Okay.
There's a note under 4.2.2.2 at the top of page 12,
Mm-hmm.
which is under the conditional use criteria, just to clarify, in the existing zoning bylaw, there's a set of performance standards,
Yep.
and this just references those within the conditional use criteria.
Okay.
And then one I forgot to underline, I noticed, was under the next section, 4.2.2.3, administration and enforcement. The bylaw had previously suggested that applicants submit materials to the chair of the Development Review Board for scheduling. And in my experience, it's always a better idea to have a single point of contact. That's the zoning administrator. And then the zoning administrator deals with the
Right.
chair of the DRB. So I just clarified that
Right.
in that language.
And I think we had mentioned that or taled about that.
Yeah,
in
I
that
think,
meeting.
yeah. Hope everything I changed we talked about.
Yeah.
In the
And how would you know?
Jim's building in his own town.
You just need a good memory. That's all.
I'm on the development review board myself, so I can relate to trying to keep things straightforward. So it's
Oh, yeah.
appreciated. So 4.2.2.4 at the bottom of 12 and up onto 13. That just kind of reorganizing the submittal requirements a little bit.
Yep.
There's not, I don't really think, a lot of or much new in there. It's just kind of pulled together from different disparate
Right.
sections of the bylaw to try to put it all in one place.
Good summary.
And, oh yeah, and then there was a request, that last paragraph that's underlined in the middle of page 13 about the DRB being able to waive one or more of the requirements based on good cause as shown by the applicant. So that one was added. And
Yeah, we didn't have any language like that, did we?
right, no, I guess not. And, there's certainly some, good, I think we talked about the last meeting, sometimes there's really large parcels, and if you go by the requirements specifically, it wants, plan for the entire 200-acre parcel and adjoining properties and, things like that are just, or the type of use, it may not be relevant or appropriate to have, or needed to have all the different details, so. The next section is site plan approval, and under site plan approval on page 14, D through I, those are just items that were added to be consistent with the things that you typically review under site plans per statute. They didn't have anything on bicycle and pedestrian access and safety, or exterior lighting, or signs, water supply, wastewater disposal. Erosion control and stormwater management is always it's a big issue now.
Mm-hmm.
And then one that we still have to work on. So we'll revisit this building, siting, and design, because that's in the performance standards. There's already a performance standard that deals with that, but I think we want to take a close look at that and see how prescriptive or non-prescriptive you want to be with that. But right now it's there as kind of a placeholder.
Okay.
Then the site plan review procedure, I just straightened out some of the hearing timing requirements and deadlines according to statute.
Yeah, we talked a fair
Those
amount
things
about
changed, they changed from 60 days to 45 days.
Yeah.
And it was 60 days from the time an application was received, and now it's 45 days to the time that the hearing is closed.
Right.
So I straightened that out. And then the last thing really was on the last page of that section, 4.2.5 waivers. I had that as a placeholder. I think that was taken from Shaftesbury or something. And Sid said he was going to draft something. So I don't have that
And he's
yet.
conspicuously absent tonight.
Yeah, so maybe he didn't do it. I don't know.
It's like calling in sick when you don't have your homework done.
So that one's still just placeholder. So those were the changes made subsequent to the last meeting.
Good.
Those were all easy.
Yep.
Section 5 is not.
Nope.
So consequently, I only did the first two zoning districts in Section 5. Section 5, deals with the rural residential zoning districts, the village district, the commercial district, the industrial district. Then it starts to get into the overlay districts. So I thought we'd start with the rural residential districts. Because there's questions about, uses and what requires what kind of review and approval. And so we really want to make sure everybody's comfortable with all those things. So if you look at the review notes, it says Pownal zoning bylaw review notes for section 5 at the top.
Everybody got that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then it looks like this. They actually have it.
Looks like that.
It's black and white, and that's right.
Okay.
Had it, now it's disappeared?
Yep.
Yeah, that happens.
So it's like it back there.
I've got an extra.
Thank you.
All right.
A good resource person.
Absolutely.
So one of the things I'm trying to do as we're going through the bylaw is to shorten and simplify things, to take out excessive verbiage if we can. So I've done that in like some of the introductory paragraphs and purpose statements. So I won't read them exactly, but you can take a look at those if you haven't already,
Yeah.
and just
Look through it.
feel free to get back to me with comments. But the first section is an introduction to zoning districts, and so I just kind of shortened it down to the nuts and bolts of why you have different zoning districts.
Yep.
Yeah.
And what they are.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
you don't need to reference section 7 at this point.
Yes,
Yeah.
some of the things in there get into a little bit more like almost like criteria rather than just like the purpose statements. So I
Yeah.
wrote this down. And again, you know, the dreaded land use matrix is something that I still hope to get rid of. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes.
We're with you on that.
So then the rural residential district 2, section 5.1. Again, I shortened down the purpose statement quite a bit. Basically, you know, the rural residential 2 district, as you all know, but maybe everybody doesn't know, is the kind of the outlying rural residential district. So, you know, the village district is in along the state highways, and then there's a residential district 1, which is around those, and then further out off of the secondary town roads, further away from the centers in the village centers, is the rural residential 2 district.
Right.
So kind of the focus on that is, you know, preserving you know, character, scenic qualities while providing opportunity for low density residential and limited non-residential development. The type and density of development also is intended to limit the need for costly expansion of public infrastructure into this rural area, which, you know, you could probably add things to that if you wanted to, but you know, I also try to think, you know, why you would add things to it, and I'm like, okay, would a lawsuit come rolling down the road someday that really got into this purpose statement and it really made a difference if it said a little bit more, a little bit less? You know, I think as long as it really hits on the core purpose, then most of the attention would go to the specific standards.
But there's follow-up to the purpose statement within the rest of the
Yeah,
section
and
too.
it's backed up, you know, in the town plan
Right.
as well. So, you know, again, you don't need to
Yeah.
repeat everything in that.
Yeah.
Okay, now so the first part is the part where, you know, I start messing up the order of everything
Yeah.
right away.
Yeah.
So the first part is 5.1.2, uses not requiring a permit. Okay, so there's quite a list of things that don't require a permit, and it's a good list. I don't really take any exceptions to the list necessarily.
When you say permit, what type of permit?
A zoning permit, right? So so you wouldn't, if you wanted to, for example, repair your driveway,
Right.
you would not have to go to the zoning administrator to get a permit.
Yeah.
Good idea, I
Yeah.
think. I wouldn't want to do that. So it's a nice list, but I noticed in reviewing the bylaw that the same list is like in
5.2.
every single section
Yeah.
for
Right.
all the different districts. So I was like, well, why don't we just create one? Because if it doesn't require
Permit.
a permit, it doesn't require
Right.
a permit.
And then signify if
So-
one's related to R2 versus just R1.
Yeah, I think they're all the same.
Okay.
Well, this part is all the same. The
This part,
things that doesn't require
this
a
part,
permit,
the
right,
uses
yeah.
that don't
Yeah,
require a
it's
permit.
verbatim.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was reading it. I was like, wait, I just read
Yeah,
this.
yes.
So if that's not, if there's one in one district that but they seem to all be the same. So I suggest in the next iteration of this, when I renumber it, that there would be a new section that would be 5.1, uses not requiring a permit in any district. And then the existing 5.1, the rural residential, would become 5.2. But
Yeah.
for the time being, forget that I said that.
Okay.
And we're just going to go
Yeah.
with the existing numbering.
We don't have to dive into that
in-
tonight.
in the, in the
Number-
bylaws. Okay,
Okay.
numbers come later. There were a couple things though that statute, you know, the state planning law is changed, and you know they've added a couple of things to things that you can't require a permit for. So I mean, you might as well put those in your bylaw too. Well, at least let's see.
Like the
see.
small
So
accessory
The
structures.
small
This is-
accessory
yeah.
structure, it's very explicit about that. So,
So if you're putting in something
something
that size, you don't have to get a permit.
under 300 square
Right.
feet and no more than 10 feet high.
Yeah,
you
and it
don't
used to
need
be
a
the
permit.
144.
Yes,
Right,
right,
that's
the
right.
bylaw
That's what I was
has,
just looking for.
Yeah.
has its, at 5.1.2.1 at the top, has a smaller thing.
Right.
But now the statute says it's gonna be 300.
So it's gonna be
So it's gonna
300.
be 300.
Yeah.
And you, even if you don't like it, that's what it
Uh-huh.
is.
Right, yeah.
So, and then just quickly, but momentarily skipping to the top of the next page of my notes, a couple of other things were added to the statute that you can't require a permit for: forestry operations and accepted silvicultural practices as defined by the Commissioner of Forest, Parks and Recreation, and solar energy devices on a roof having a slope of less than or equal to 5 degrees.
Huh.
That's in the statute. I don't know. It's kind of, it's almost redundant, because you can't require a zoning permit for solar collectors that
Right.
have a certificate of public good
Yeah.
anyway. So, but it's, for whatever reason, that provision is still in the
But
statute.
this would be a personal, like,
If you're not
3
grid,
panels
if you're
on your
not,
roof.
like, if you're not grid connected,
yeah,
yeah, then you could require a permit for it unless
if it's 6
it's on,
degrees or more.
It's on a
Yeah.
roof
Uh-huh.
of that slope.
Yeah.
And why do they differentiate? Why do they? What's the cutoff at 5?
You know, that's been in there for a long time, and I don't really know. I suspect that it has to do with an aesthetic thing, like, you know, people in, you know, historic buildings or areas,
Yeah.
you know, if
with
they're
the steeper pitch
if they're
roofs.
steeper pitched, you can see them more, and if it's a flatter pitched roof, you
Okay.
can't. I don't know. It's in the statute though, so I was
That's
like,
great.
you might have put it there. Now, okay, ready for the first one that could generate some controversy.
Okay.
Ready? Oh, I'm sorry. No, let's hold off on the controversy briefly.
Okay.
At the, I skipped 3 at the bottom of the page. Telecommunication facilities subject to jurisdiction of the PUC. That's one I just said. So anything that's grid connected that needs a certificate of public good. And the,
Oh, there you go, on the
the
prior.
second one's is, you know, telecommunications and public power utility those are the ones that are covered by section 248.
Yep.
So you can't regulate those. And the last bullet there is required agricultural practices. So that's going to affect some things in your bylaw where you were, you know, had allowed uses for farming and things like that. You can't even require a zoning permit for any kind of farming activity or operation or barn or anything else. So
So if you're building a barn, you don't need a zoning permit?
not only do you not need one, you couldn't get one if you wanted one because the town's prohibited from giving you one. You can just do it.
If you're operating a farm.
Yeah.
Well, it has to be legit. Yeah, it
Right.
has to be farming operation. It can't be
As
just
defined by the
it can't
Secretary
be,
of Agriculture.
Yeah, it can't be a,
6 chickens.
yeah, it can't be a barn to put your RV in. or
7,
something.
yes.
So it's got to be legitimate farming operation. You
Like,
can
with those
you,
alpacas.
the town can ask that anyone who does that require that file a notice of intent to build. I think so you have a record of it probably for
Right.
listers and stuff like that. But you can't regulate it or require a permit for it. So I added all those. Okay. So
Alright.
it's just statute. So and I can talk to your zoning administrator about those because lots of questions get raised about those. So if there's any questions.
Yeah.
So so controversy. Here we go. Section 5.1.2.10. Okay, this one gives lists a very minimal impact home occupation.
Oh yeah, I've read this.
Is not requiring a permit at all, and you know, on the surface of it, I agree with that because there's like that could be just like, you know, somebody doing online tax preparation at their home office that you would never know that it was happening there at all. You know, so something as minor as that. But when you get into these home occupations, they, you know, sometimes more stuff starts happening there, and I think it's my own opinion is I think it's a good idea to have just a record of it. That, you know, yes, you can do that in your home as a home occupation within these limits. You have a permit to do it, and then, you know, if it starts going beyond that, then you can say, oh, you know, you
Yeah.
you have this permit that puts some limits on what you're doing. It just kind of puts everybody on, you know, makes everybody aware so everybody knows what's going on.
So, excuse me, are
Yeah.
you suggesting that we permit that, or that we
Yeah.
just have them, because this is listed under not
Yeah.
requiring a permit.
I'm suggesting that you
You
move
it
to
the
just letting the zoning administrator give them a
put it-
permit
okay,
for
okay.
it.
An administrative permit,
Okay.
actually. is,
But it's
uh,
just for these things.
Or
Or for
it's,
any-
it's actually excuse me, I didn't
Yeah,
replicate
that's
the whole
okay.
bylaw, but
Okay.
That's
it's basically a home occupation that's entirely within the primary building, doesn't occupy more than 30%.
Right.
Nobody
So
outside
those-
the house
yeah.
works there. There's no external changes to the appearance of the buildings. There's no external signs or external display of merchandise, and you can't hear anything having to do with the business from a neighboring property. Like you said,
And-
basically you never know what's going on.
Right.
Now,
Alright, so it requires a permit?
Well,
It
it doesn't
doesn't
now.
now.
It doesn't now.
And you're
And I'm just
suggesting-
suggesting that the
So it's
zoning
just-
administrator could just issue a permit for that.
okay.
Okay, so
And-
but if you had,
Well,
so when
one at a
this
time.
changes to this, alright, so
If
say
it-
you use 46% of your dwelling for business, what does that mean?
Well, then you'd fall into a different category where you might either be prohibited from doing it, or you might need approval from the Development Review Board. which is actually, you know, is something that we can talk about too, as to because we're going to talk about those higher levels of home occupation in just a minute. And if you want to bump those back down to just being administrative permits, you can do that too.
Okay.
And it's
So that's what you're talking about with this, with 51210, is an administrative permit?
Right.
yeah, so
I see.
I think that
It
there's
sounded very vague. Oh,
well, there's
just
like
tell him to
there's like two
issue
kinds
a
of
permit.
permits, I guess, in a permitting process. One is administrative, which is basically your zoning administrator just kind of goes down a checklist. You know, in a typical
Making sure the rules are being
yeah, in a
followed.
typical
Okay.
case,
Yeah,
it would be like
regarding
somebody
bylaw.
wants to build a garage, you know, and you say, does it meet the front yard, the side yard, the rear yard setbacks? Check, check,
Sure.
check.
Yeah.
Height, check. Give them a permit.
Right.
Same type of thing with a home occupation. Does it meet all these things? Check, 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 check. Get the permit. Right. Then it goes.
Then we have
it-
a record that
Right. So that's what I call administrative. Where and the next level is the so-called like quasi judicial permitting that has to go to the
the
Development
DRB.
Review
Yeah.
Board,
Okay.
and so that's you know a level of review that takes into consideration more than things that you can just check off a list, basically.
and that's not just a residence, it's any building.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which we've had.
Yeah.
Come
So
before the DRB.
so you know so before we go any further, you say I that's a suggestion on my part. There's absolutely nothing legally wrong with keeping it just the way it is. So that's just one for you
Right.
guys to discuss.
So
Can I ask
everybody
a
make a
question?
note, circle that.
Yeah, can I ask
So
a
with-
question?
Absolutely.
Okay, just, alright, so somebody that's had a business that's already established, what does that do to them?
Nothing.
Is it grandfathered in?
Yeah.
Is that what we're saying?
Yeah. I mean, if there's an existing.
And you're trying to change the business, right?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you change the bylaw, amend the bylaw after something's established, it doesn't have any effect on that unless they're going
Right.
to change it. Again, I mean, if they're going to expand it or do something different.
Yeah, the 30% thing though is, the only other thing is like, if somebody has storage of
Yeah.
items, 30%, I mean,
That'll use it up
you know,
fast.
and like Christmas time,
Yeah.
we're talking 70% of my house is Christmas. I'm in my kitchen wrapping gifts, so I don't know about that percentage thing. That could limit people.
Who knows it though?
Huh?
Knows it.
Well, now,
Anybody that follows
everybody.
Anybody that follows me on Facebook because I complain about it all Christmas.
Well, you know, I mean,
You're ratting on yourself.
Yeah.
it's a good question though, because I mean,
But I'm thinking about like anybody that's not established. If they're trying, we're talking about, hey, we want people here for business.
Yeah.
Well, hey, let's throw more restrictions on them. I understand if you don't want whatever business with neon signs and things like that right next door to
Good example.
to you. Yeah. So
Good example. That's why you have additional restrictions.
DRB.
I would, yeah, I would
30%,
just.
you're saying 30% is too restrictive.
She's saying it's restrictive, that we probably want some restriction because this is not a business district, it's a
Yeah.
residential
But
district.
if it's not
But
but if
but
it's not
not
affecting the
impacting- if it's
outside,
not,
if you're
right,
if you're
if it's
you're in
all
your
internal.
house and nobody knows.
Nothing shows
It's
on the
not-
outside,
Right,
so
if
that's,
you're,
I don't
if
care
you're
where
a
it is,
hoarder,
where
you
it
could
is.
have, you know, it's not a business, but
Hey
it could
now,
be just
hey
a
now,
store
you can-
hoarder.
Right.
Yeah.
These are
But I
Jim's
think-
suggestions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
No, but I think-
so I mean, one thing one thing you could do, like the statute says you have to allow home occupations. Too. You say you can require a permit, but you have to allow it.
Yeah.
And it says within a minor portion of the dwelling.
Right.
I think that and the thing is, you're calling it a home occupation, so it falls under this category. You could call it something else
Right.
if it uses more than that. But there's nothing magical about that 30%
Okay.
either. You know, you could say 50% if you wanted to.
70 around Christmas time.
Yeah, well,
telling you.
you could probably put a seasonal thing in there. You could probably do that. I think that'd be reasonable.
But then you have to kind of denote the
I mean,
type
you know,
of business
the
too.
reason, the reason that it was, I mean, one, obviously that it was put in the statute because the recognition that a lot of folks, that's the best, most reasonable way for people to operate a small business
Right.
is out of their home.
Yeah.
The reason that, there's restrictions put in there is because they don't, if you're in a say a residential neighborhood, your neighbors will have an expectation that they live in a residential neighborhood,
Right, yeah,
not,
exactly.
not a business
Yeah.
district.
Not
They
Madison.
exclude drug dealers.
So,
Right.
well,
They come and go.
wait.
is that-
Yeah.
so
Stay
this
focused.
is the
Yeah.
question. It's like.
Just to get
So what
So
much
there's,
percentage of their-
there's a, I don't know if it's a permitted home occupation or not in the neighborhood I live in, but I think it's supposed to be like a catering business or something. And, I personally don't have any problem with it, but I can see where somebody might, because there's always
Comings and goes.
there's always delivery
Catering
trucks
vans.
parked in the
Yeah.
road
Yeah.
and unloading stuff and
Yeah.
loading stuff and
Yeah.
tiles
Disruption
and
of
stuff
traffic.
Board of Health
outside.
has to clear you anyway. No.
So so it's like that.
How does that affect farmers? Or are they
Farmers are exempt
exempt from that, from
everything.
the,
Everything.
So I'm still
Yep.
not clear how the language would change here.
I wouldn't
Would you put
change.
it
I
on a
wouldn't
different
change the
list, or-
language. The only thing is, I would move it over. My suggestion was to move it over to,
Permit required.
if you look at the
Permitted
next
uses.
page, permitted uses.
Yeah,
no,
okay.
no site plan review required. Number 7. See, I moved it there already.
Okay.
So that basically just means the zoning administrator would look at it, says it meets all
Yeah.
these. Okay,
Yeah.
here's your permit. Same as if somebody was building a garage or whatever, but there'd be a record of it. That was
Right.
just
And
a
I
note.
think that's a big part of it, isn't it?
Have it
That
right.
we, as a municipality, has a record.
But again, this is not something it's not like I would say, if you don't do this,
Right.
Yeah.
Or there's
You
no
are
state
really-
statute that's forcing us,
Yeah.
right?
it's just it's an idea to think about. So, put a mark next to that one. And, or you can tell me, you can discuss it
Yeah.
more now if you want.
Yeah.
No, but
And-
we have plenty of
But
time.
there's
Yeah.
nothing in state statute that says, I don't remember the term you used, but it doesn't have to be like less than 50%.
That probably would get into case law somehow,
Okay.
But
'Cause
it's
you
supposed to
said
be. It's
something about
supposed
the
to be. Well, you could probably,
Mm-hmm.
I think the way that the statute reads is it says you have to allow it.
Yeah.
If it's a customary thing that's business that's practiced in a home
Right.
that's incidental and in a
It's-
minor
okay.
portion of the home. There's nothing
Minor
that
portion
there's,
of the home,
but there's
but
nothing.
it's-
But that you have
okay.
to allow that. There's
Yeah.
nothing that says that you can't allow more. So
Oh,
you,
Right.
okay.
so you could take that
Okay.
30%
And not put a percent at
and
all.
not put
Or make a
percent.
seasonal
Yeah.
thing,
Yeah.
depending on the nature
Yeah.
of the business.
Yeah.
So you could change that
Mhm.
if you want to,
Mhm.
and that'd be fine.
Okay.
But right now, your bylaw is 30%,
Mhm.
but it says no permits required at all.
Mhm.
But you compromise. You know, you
Mhm.
could require an administrative permit and make that
Yeah.
50 or 60%,
Or you
whatever
could-
wanted.
I mean,
Depends on the person, what's required for living.
mhm.
Well, I have a bed
Well,
and a
yeah,
stove
yeah.
and a fridge.
That's it.
That's it.
Well, yeah,
Because
it
I think the
pretty depends on the size of the house. I mean, if you've
Yeah.
got a business where you're, you know, packaging something and you know,
It moves
bringing
in
it
and
out
out.
and sending it out. If it's a really small house, you know, it's like,
Yeah.
yeah. So, yeah, the
Um,
percentage thing isn't always a fair deal.
Right.
People have different sized houses. If somebody has a 6,000 square foot house, they can use 1,000 square feet and they've got plenty of wiggle room. If somebody has a 1,500 square foot house
Right.
and want to do the same thing, they can't.
Right.
So, you know.
So
License.
what we could do is regulate the traffic flow if that became an issue.
Yeah, I mean, in this kind of case, you know, I mean, you know, you're probably looking at, you know, since there's no employees,
Right, yeah, I don't think it's
and
a,
you're not supposed to change the external appearance. So, you know, so if you start like putting in, you know, like a parking area for customers and stuff
Uh-huh.
like that,
And then,
then
yeah.
you're starting to change
yeah,
Right.
the
Right.
character.
yeah.
Then that
Yeah.
changes it.
So it sounds like these safeguards are what we need, that's all.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's
Mm-hmm.
pretty standard.
Okay.
But you can we can revisit it and play around with the numbers. Okay, onward then. So now at this point, so I changed the structure of the thing a little bit. You know, permitted uses requiring a permit, and then it references the land use matrix. So again, I'm trying to get away from the land use matrix thing.
Yes.
But I was trying to keep all the categories of uses. You know,
Okay.
that has like every land use you could possibly imagine, and so I kind of, that's unusual to say. So I try to aggregate them a little bit, and so I put them in categories that I found works well in other towns. You know, permitted uses, again, you know, administrative permits, what I call no site plan review required. So it's permitted, the zoning administrator can issue a permit. The next category of uses is permitted uses site plan review required. So, you know, we went over the site plan review criteria at the last meeting. That just goes to the DRB.
Right.
There's no, you know, funky, somewhat subjective conditional use criteria
Yeah.
really. But there's some fairly specific site plan requirements. And then the conditional uses, they get to be, you know, a little bit more judgment is exercised by the development review board for those. I try to steer away from those for most uses because everybody likes certainty.
Right.
So in some cases that makes sense, but I tried to keep those to a minimum. So anyway, so these are the ones that I put. For permitted uses, no site plan review required. The statute, again, is pretty clear on some of these things. 1 and 2 family dwellings, they have to be allowed by administrative permit. A family child care facility serving 6 or fewer children, that's number 2 on that. Sorry I didn't number these pages.
What's a family childcare facility as opposed to childcare facility?
I don't know. That's what the statute says, but it probably is defined, and maybe I should put in the reference. And then
Seems
It
redundant.
might be that you're taking care of children within your family home.
yeah, maybe that's what it means. So, I mean, that's the intent, because what the statute does for numbers 2 and number 3, the community care or group home serving not more than 8 persons with disabilities, it says basically those things, number 2 and 3, they have to be considered just as you would a single family home. So because a single family home's allowed by administrative permit, then so is the family child care and the community care home.
That's the numbers,
With the,
6
with
and
those
8.
numbers
Six
of
is-
people.
Yeah.
Yep. So, yeah. So those are things that are basically required by statute. The number 4 is accessory buildings, you know, garages, sheds, things like that. Things that are above the threshold of things that don't require a permit at all, but don't need any kind of special review.
Yep.
Then number 5. So number 5 is you've kind of got this in your bylaw now.
Yeah, the accessories.
The accessory dwelling unit provision in section 5.1.5.1. I think since you were at they amended the statute to put a very specific provision in there about accessory dwelling units. So I basically took the statutory language and put it in there. Now I highlighted the 30% in the second line because it doesn't have to be that. It's just that a lot of them seem to.
What
We
is
have
it
that.
What is it
30%?
about 30%?
I don't
Yeah,
know.
what do you
is it?
consider an accessory dwelling? We're talking,
Treehouse? Or?
yeah,
No,
like a cottage or
it can be
Mother-in-law
it could
apartment.
be
mother-in-law apartment?
it could be a mother-in-law apartment. It could be a separate building that's
But it's
small.
somebody that lives in it?
Yep.
Okay,
It's a dwelling.
just wanna make sure.
So we do have the 30% in our existing.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
on page 27.
So it doesn't.
It's a livable building.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like a
and-
tiny home.
Yeah, it'd be small, but it's something that again, you.
But I mean, it isn't just a structure, a storage structure.
No.
or a
No,
garage.
no,
It's a
no.
dwelling.
Somebody
It's,
lives
It's a
in.
living.
it's
Right.
for living, and again,
Yeah.
you know, they changed the statute a few years ago to require that towns allow that. And they did that, you know, to try to encourage. It's one more affordable housing tool, basically. So everybody has to allow this, but you can, you know, tweak the numbers and
And-
ratios a little bit.
In fact, our current Part B on page 27 says floor space shall not exceed 30% of the floor space of the existing living area of the single-family residence or 400 square feet, whichever is greater.
Yeah, so it puts
So-
a max.
Yeah, and I'd have to look about
I think 30.
that 400 thing. Yeah.
Well, they're just, you know, if you have
A
you
huge
happen to
place.
live in the Taj Mahal, for
Right.
instance, 30% of that number is a little different
it's
than.
A little bit
big.
big,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I guess you probably could keep that.
Ronnie
square
knows a lot of
footage
those
in
people, they live in those mansions.
Yeah.
And you know, again, the you know the catch on this too, you know, it's still subject to, you know, getting any required water supply and wastewater
Yeah.
Sure.
permits.
Setbacks.
Sure.
So you know, somebody can't put an extra dwelling unit in there if their septic system can't handle it. So that still applies.
Okay.
What if they don't connect to the septic and use tank and then pump out?
Well, if they can get a permit for it, that's okay. But they have to get a permit. So
There's a cricket
so
in here.
number
Yeah.
number 6
Got 'em
is
trapped.
number 6 is just another thing that's all these things, wonderful things that are in the statute now. So a structure not exceeding 200 square feet in area and used for the sale of agricultural produce or other locally produced natural products, which it may be a minor distinction from an agricultural use.
Right.
But you've got that now in 5.1.3.3. A stand not exceeding 200 square feet in area for the sale of natural products.
Yeah.
So,
So how's that different than 5.1.2.1 with the, sorry,
These numbers.
I
With
know.
the-
What?
the agricultural.
on the first page,
Yeah.
the first page states now that the requirement not
For a
having to be
structure.
permitted is 300 square feet, 10 feet high in height. So
Oh, well, I
we can
guess-
restrict a farm stand and,
Yeah, it's probably when you throw it all together, you're probably right. There's probably not. I mean,
right,
you know, the difference with this one is that, you know, it's a retail operation and it's not necessarily associated with that particular
Yeah.
farm. So you know, you could
They can get
put one up on your in your front yard selling produce from
From your
different
backyard.
farms in the area.
yeah. Okay,
you know, so.
all right. I don't care if they're separate. That's
And
fine.
Mountain Avenue.
So then number
Yeah, like
7
the
is
kind of-
just the home occupation provision
trailer.
that I moved
Yeah.
over
Mhm.
from
Yeah.
the first part.
Yeah.
So that can either stay there or go back.
Mhm.
It's very portable. Okay, so now the second one, the second category of uses, permitted uses, site plan review required. I like the way it starts right out with cemeteries. I can bury that one a little bit further down. But the only reason I put that is that there's a list of that your bylaw has now, a list of limitations, a limitation section that says something to the effect that these uses can only be regulated with respect to this, that, and the other thing. One of which is location. So instead of just allowing those things anywhere, I move them and stick them into the sections where they seem to belong. So you have to allow cemeteries somewhere in your town.
But they have to perk.
So I just put I will put them in most of the districts just because whatever.
They're good neighbors.
Yeah. So if you don't want that to be the number one use, I can move that down the list. So now the second two things, 2 and 3. So they look similar to 2 and 3 from up above, but this is serving more than 6 children or more than 8 people.
What is that, or conditional, what does that mean?
So I wrote in or conditional because if you wanted to, you could make them conditional uses.
Right.
Oh, I see.
So I just put them in as permitted uses, site plan review required, no special conditional use. But
But the site review could put conditions on it.
they could
DRB.
put
Yeah,
the
the
site
DRB.
plan review could put conditions on, but they'd really be just limited to the things that are covered in a site plan review very specifically.
Okay.
You know, traffic access and parking and circulation and landscaping, things like that. So,
So conditional use gives the DRB greater leeway.
yeah, I think that's a fair statement.
Yeah, okay.
And maybe a level of subjectivity, you know.
Yeah.
But you know, try to be, especially with the performance standards, try to be as clear as possible.
Sure.
But there's a bunch of performance standards, you know, and so anyway, you know, I that's where they usually land in these residential districts, but you. Now the number 4 is home occupations meeting the following conditions. So now this is I think really just taken from your bylaw now, the way it is.
Yeah, I'm
I
trying to find it.
didn't invent anything here. So this is kind of the next
Yeah.
level up. So there's a slightly more intense use for home occupation. So this can happen, it's permitted, it just has to meet the site plan requirements, but it has some more conditions. Well,
So
it
like
has.
you could have an employee.
You can have an employee. You can have a sign. You can sell stuff out of the property as long as you're making it yourself. You can store equipment and materials, but they have to be screened from view. I guess you can do a little bit of merchandise display, and then there can be some noise and dust and things like that, but it's supposed to be not changing the residential character of the area. So it's, you know, significantly more intensive use than the other one. So you'd want, and again, this is from your bylaw
Right.
now, the way it is.
And is there a reason, like in the previous one, the page 7, number 7, the one before, the smaller use, all it mentions is noise. It doesn't mention any of these other, you know, dust, smoke, but it does mean, you know, so this is where I got the idea of traffic when I read this one before.
Okay. Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
But since it's a much smaller operation,
I guess
It
it's the
just-
assumption, again,
Yeah.
all I did was move them around
Yeah,
within your
okay.
bylaw, I
Yeah,
didn't
okay.
change the criteria,
okay,
but, feel free,
yeah, okay.
yeah.
All right.
So now, you know, your bylaw it lists a lot of uses, and then there's stuff that are in that matrix. So then I went to the matrix
Okay.
to see what else might be there that's allowed in the district, and there's a few things. You know, the inn or bed and breakfast establishment. So I brought that in, but I tried to be as, you know, clear about these things as possible, because there's all sorts of different ways of gauging how big of an inn or bed and breakfast. So I think the easiest way is with limiting it to, you know, a certain number of bedrooms that are rented to guests. So in the rural residential district, you don't have to do that, but if you want to limit it, then that's probably the way to do it. So I just, that highlighted section I put there is just...
And we would look to a number, to come to a consensus on a number there, since you don't have a number.
Right.
All right.
If we go that way,
Yeah, if we go that way.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Again, you know, so this is kind of your rural area, which is, you know, I mean, not typically where you have a lot of commercial activity, other than things like country inns.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah. And then you know, another one you had was like a garden center or plant nursery. You know, and again, it's intended to be, you know, primarily that. I mean, you could, you know, the danger you get into though, all the language there, I think, is because, you know, somebody could start selling, you know, some nursery plants, and then decide that they're going to start selling some, you know, gardening equipment and hardware, and pretty soon, you know, it becomes like a John Deere sales place with a few potted plants.
Right.
You know, so it's kind of like you try to make sure that the garden center or plant nursery remains the primary use. And then I think number 7, you know, you've got that sawmill and associated log and lumber storage. I think those might be allowed anyway by statute. I'd have to check the forestry and silvicultural stuff from the Commissioner of Forestry, but is in your bylaw, and it's fine. You know, I mean, it's either has to be allowed or you add it anyway. Okay. Well, shall I go on to the conditional use?
Sure.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so now the conditional uses, again, I try not to have too many of these things in the bylaws, but if you wanted to have a bigger inn or bed and breakfast, you know, with conditional use, I mean, you might say, you know, because a lot of the conditional use stuff is like, you know, character of the area, and, you know, standards like that. So if it was in an area, you know, where there were a number of residential, you know, properties right around, and, you know, maybe you wouldn't want to have a 20-room inn, but if it was a 500-acre, you know, farm and a huge old rambling farmhouse half a mile off the road.
Pownal View Barn, didn't want to sell furniture, want to change over.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I mean, you know, that's so it's there again. You know, it's an option. You know, or you know, you could just, you know, if you got rid of the number of bedrooms on number 5, then it wouldn't matter, because you could do one of any size anywhere in the district. But if you wanted to keep them, you know, smaller ones allowed, but bigger ones take a closer look at, then you could do that. So again, it's
But if they already exist,
anything that exists is you can't touch, unless they decide they're going to change it.
Unless they want to change and requires a permit.
Number 2 is, again, it's one of those limitations that you have to allow in your town somewhere, state or municipally owned and operated buildings and facilities. So if the state wants to build a building, or the town wants to build a new town
Even in
garage or
RR2.
something, you don't have to. You know, I mean, you could limit those to RR1.
As long as you give them
village,
space
commercial. It has to be realistic. You know, you couldn't limit them to places where it would be almost impossible for them to actually build. So you don't have to have it here, but I put it there as a conditional use.
Okay.
A lot of times towns don't like to tie their own hands, actually. You know, so, you know, if you have a good spot for a you know, a town, well, you know, like when, you know, Pownal, put in the sewage treatment facility or something, that's the best place for it. So
Right, exactly.
put it there. Another one that was listed in the things, veterinary hospitals, animal boarding kennels, and accessory uses. I mean, those are always tricky. Veterinary hospitals, not necessarily so much, but sometimes they have boarding with them, because
Okay.
again, it's kind of it's a bit of a commercial use, and it generates some traffic, so you don't necessarily want it, outlying areas, but if you have it in too close, they can be noisy.
Yeah, I was gonna say noise.
And so,
At all
so,
levels.
Ours is next to a
so,
ours
so
is
we-
next to a motel.
right, it is, right. So we put it in here as a conditional use, and have a, I have a table of dimensional standards, but I have a special dimensional standard for this one of 5 acres, which I'm not sure if that one's in your bylaw now. Yeah, this one's in your bylaws with 5 acre minimums. So, I mean, I think that's wise, so. Yeah, I tried to streamline the requirements a little bit, so they're not too extensive. They're already conditional uses, so they're already being taken a pretty close look at. And then we detail a little bit on public and commercial recreational uses. I mean, those things sometimes you don't really think about.
Right.
Like if somebody wants to do a cross-country ski center, or build a golf course,
Mm-hmm.
bid or a driving range or something. I mean, are you going to allow those things? I mean, if you're going to allow them in Pownal, probably they'll be in the RR, the RR2, right?
What's the current law if you recall, in Shaftesbury, they have a driving range up there on Route 7A.
Yeah.
Is that grandfathered, or is it
No,
still
they
permitted?
actually changed their zoning to allow that.
They did.
Yeah. They
Okay.
did. They did. In fact, they expanded it a little bit. I worked with them a couple of years ago on their zoning. They had amended their zoning to allow that in particular, and then they decided they wanted to amend their zoning to allow other things like, outdoor centers and mountain bike trails
Yeah,
and
okay.
stuff like that. So they did that. But again, this is just kind of a generic list, partly derived from, I think, your matrix, and partly
Okay.
from other
What
sources.
about something like a gun range?
Yeah, you could put that in there too. Now, those would definitely be probably belong in the conditional use area because of the noise issues and stuff.
I hear the one in town already.
Yeah.
You what?
But I hear the gun range in town now.
Well,
and I'm not close to it.
Yeah, there's formal and informal ones, of course. So, Shaftesbury had. Since we're talking about Shaftesbury, they've had a lot of controversy about the
Sure, with Hale Mountain.
Yeah,
the Hale Mountain over the years, and I don't know if it's ever been. I think that the only time it kind of died down and was sort of resolved was when the problem was exported to Glastonbury, and it became a problem up there.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
so.
there you go.
But you certainly, absolutely, you can put that in. I mean, one thing that became very clear to me with that whole controversy in Shaftesbury and Glastonbury is that there's a real need for that. It's just a question of where do you put it?
Yeah.
A lot of this stuff probably would wind up inside of the racetrack.
Well, there.
No, I mean, it makes sense.
So there's now, and I added, some possible additional conditions.
Right.
And again, this is taken from other regulations. 20 acre minimum lot size, setback at least 100 feet from side rear lines, no more than 3% building coverage. Again, keeping any retail food sales and things as accessory to the primary use. That was it, I guess. So those
Well,
are.
and you might add, to Michelle's point, you might add noise restrictions during certain times of the day.
Yep. If you, yeah.
Those
yeah.
are conditions we put on motorcycle tracks and things like that.
Yeah, and
Time
you
of
can, I mean,
day.
you can do that, I think, because it's a conditional use, you know, pulling in the performance standards
Sure.
anyway. But, so those are more strict dimensional requirements, but you could be more specific
Sure.
with those.
We had a club down there flying airplanes, caused a lot of controversy.
Oh, yeah,
yeah.
I remember that, yeah, yeah. So, that's, you know, again, that's, you know, options.
Because
to
they look
think
like
about.
real planes going right in front of my car.
Sure did.
Oh, yeah. And the noise carried up the hill.
Yep. Noise does carry.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
Rick Morgenthau, I think he was a big fan of that. Wasn't he?
Well,
Hi, Rick, if you're listening.
A lot of drones, like drone clubs, right?
Keep it somewhere else.
So number 5 at the top of the next page. So your bylaw now allows multifamily homes as conversions of existing buildings with one dwelling unit per 10,000 square feet of lot area, something like that. 5.1.4.4, I think it is. Yeah, conversion of an existing dwelling not less than 25 years old or with additions thereto less than 10 years old to a multiple family dwelling provided that the following criteria are met, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So now that's okay, but I'm like, I struggle sometimes with those things when they have those years on them.
Mm-hmm.
Because somebody's got to keep track of that and document that. I mean, the reason that it's put in there is that, you know, they don't want people to build a great big new residential structure and turn it into a multifamily building. But to me, I'd say, well, if it's okay to have a house converted to a multifamily dwelling, why not just say you can build a multifamily dwelling but limit the number of units in it? I mean, that's, you know, that's a departure for me, because I spent the whole first 90% of my career dealing with density, you know, like units per acre.
Right.
So, you know, that, and, you know, the trend now is kind of getting away from that and not worrying so much about that per se. You want to keep it within a reasonable size, but as long as the water and the sewer handle it, and as long as it's not, you know, horribly out of character with the
Right.
area, if somebody wants to build anew,
Yeah.
you know, you could limit it in this district to, you know, 3 dwelling units per
Right.
building. You know, then, you know, why not?
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, if it's okay to convert an old house,
Why not build
Why
one?
not build a new one? Yeah.
but that's, you know, that's, again, it's different. You know, it's different. But again, I were, you know, thinking about, you know, life as a zoning administrator. Somebody comes in and you say, oh, okay, how old is your house? How old is that addition to that house? You know, prove it. You know?
Yeah.
It's like, it
Right.
might be hard to enforce.
Yep.
But anyway, so that's
Okay.
that's an idea. And again, you know, they would have to meet all the water and sewer and everything, and you could limit it to different numbers of units in different districts. So you might say, well, in the RR2 you only want to have a maximum of 3. In the R1 maybe you could have 5 or 6, you know, because it's a higher density area. So that's, you know, again, that's, I didn't put a number in there, but that's something to talk about. And number 6 is like, this was from your matrix, I think. Remember, if I remember, a landscaper business.
Yeah, that
and I
sounds
said,
familiar.
you know,
Right.
it's like, you know, and obviously the matrix doesn't have a lot of conditions or criteria, but, you know, so
Right.
a landscaping business is very typically, you know, somebody starts that, you know, from their house and it expands, and so they have some, you know, lawnmowers, and then they get a little backhoe and they get a little dump truck and they store topsoil, and
Yeah.
it's all, you know, nothing wrong with that. But you know, maybe you want to have it as a conditional use at district. So.
We have one for sale.
Back up.
No,
Landscape.
Landscaping business.
they left. They left. We have a business that left.
There you
Nice
go.
fence around it and everything. Nice.
Nice big building.
The old fire department.
So
Oh, right.
again, I think,
We're going?
Michael, I think that came from the Matrix.
They came from Troy. They left.
But it seems like, you know, it seems like it's a good idea, whether or not it did, to have that in there anyway, because I could bet there's probably a few of those around town anyway. So you probably don't want to make them non-conforming uses, since that is where they should logically be. So, anyway,
Seasonal business.
yeah. Number 7 is so mobile home parks. So you know, there's a special section in the bylaw having to do with mobile home parks, and the town subdivision regulations also apply. But you know, you have to allow mobile home parks somewhere in town.
Right.
So you know, you might want to allow them in. I'm not sure which all districts the Pownal's mobile home parks are in, but some may very well be in this district. I don't know.
25 acres, though, isn't it, for a new one?
Can't remember
Yeah,
from
what
that.
the,
Yeah,
there's
it's
a.
25 acres.
I haven't gotten to that section yet,
Okay.
but there's section there.
I think most of them are in Village, aren't they?
Yeah, I'm saying the new one have to be 25 acres.
Right.
Yeah.
So you know, so again, you don't have to have it in this district. So that just put a flag there. If you
Yeah.
don't want to allow it in the in the R2, you don't have
Right.
to.
Yeah, we have to allow it somewhere, it just, we can
Yeah.
dictate where,
Right.
Yeah.
or
Yep.
where not.
So mark that one. Then the next one is just you know, extractive industry, removal of soil, sand, gravel, stone, other earth materials for commercial purposes. And again, there's a section, special regulations in your bylaw that deals with that. Oh, and then, oh good, here's another controversial one. We need another one of
I
those.
think you're enjoying this, aren't you?
I like this.
Well, yeah, because, hey.
Truth's
you
the
know,
truth.
That's right up. So 5.1.4.5 in your existing bylaw has this language that, you know, I read it and I was like, well, what does that really do? It says any and all home businesses or occupations that do not meet the standards set in subsection 5.1.210 or 5.1.368
A through G.
must be considered as conditional uses and as such go before the DRB for site review
Yeah,
and conditional use approval.
that's amazing.
Which to me, it kind of sounds like, you know, to me that kind of says, well, if it doesn't fit into one of those categories, but it's, so it could be like a home business if somebody lives there and wants to open, you know, like a retail store, a gas station, or anything else in their backyard, and you say, well, it's not one of those, so it's still allowed as a conditional use. And I was like, well, that doesn't,
Restrict anything.
Why do
what's
we
the
have
point
it
of
in there?
having zoning?
Right.
Right, why do we have this in here at all, is what you're saying.
So I
Delete.
was like, either
I'm all for
try to
delete.
figure out a way to rewrite that or delete it.
I'd delete it, the heck with it. What'd you rewrite it for?
Yeah, I think we can make a argument for deleting it.
Do, Mike,
Unless
you're
it means something different than I read. I mean, I think maybe the intent was, well, if there's a home occupation that's a traditional home occupation, but it doesn't meet those
Right.
standards. But to me, it just opens the door wide open to anybody coming in to say, so I got this home occupation, you know, I'm gonna lease my backyard to, you know, the Kmart. They use a business that no longer
Yeah.
exists. So, you know, so I mean, I don't know. So,
All right, let's see, it seems
Mike?
waffling to me.
you've served on the DRB for quite a while.
No,
Oh,
a year and a half.
just a year and a half,
Yeah.
okay. I was wondering if there have been things that have come before it that sort of don't fit the criterias that, you know,
Not in home occupations. I
Okay.
haven't seen, John, do you recall any home occupation permits?
So this sounds like it wouldn't be necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's-
Yeah,
No, it wouldn't.
Yeah.
We have,
so I would go for
I
deleting.
can name a few and they
Uh-huh.
operate very well. And,
I go for
you know,
delete.
Mhm.
Delete.
Simplify.
Okay, and then I said my other highlighted note under that one is, you know, that then your retail, restaurant, light industrial uses go primarily in the village, commercial, and industrial districts, with some allowance in the RR1, but okay.
All right.
All right. Now the dimensions, the I created this table for the dimensional standards that apply to any uses within the district. Because right now, in addition to your land use matrix, you have a dimensional standards table that again I like if it's all in
the
one
same
place.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, how about it?
so I carried this over
Oh, here it is.
exactly what you have in that other table. I just broke it out with a couple of notes. So the minimum rear yard, you have in your other districts. I think your side and your rear are the same, but in this district the rear yard's like 40 feet, and
Yeah.
the side yard's
Why is that different?
30.
Right.
I was like, I don't care, you know, but I just thought it was interesting, so I'll keep it that way unless you want to change it.
But I can't think, there is absolutely makes no sense as to why it would be not the same that I know of.
I don't know.
It's kind of ridiculous to have that rear yard being farther than the side yard.
Yeah.
What if a guy
That's what
wants
I
to
mean.
put a little lawnmower shed? What's he gotta do, put it in the middle of the backyard?
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking
Gotta
that.
go
I
put
was
it up
thinking
next to the
that.
mountain or
Right.
something.
Yeah, I was thinking the same. I mean, the most likely place to put like a shed or outbuilding is toward the back,
That's right, in
toward
the
the
rear.
back lot line.
I'm looking at the property next to the Legion, Tiznicki. That kind of, he's got a little area there that he can do things with, and I don't think they fit today where they, back in the 50s, they were okay.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he's got an old, it was an ice cream place, and then there was some cabins.
Oh right, yeah.
And that area there, he's
So maybe we lower that to at least the same as the side.
Sure.
So now that the other significant change again, and it's kind of getting away from the way that I always did things, but so there's your density requirements. Here's 2 acre minimum lot size for principal use across the board. Whether you got water and sewer or whatever, you got to have at least 2 acres. It's okay. Except that for mobile home parks, the recreational uses, the veterinary hospitals and boarding kennels, they have larger minimum lot sizes that are specified in the use section. So then, again, like it used to be the case where like if you had a 2-family dwelling, and I think I need to change that in the dimensional tables to from dwelling unit to principal building. But you said so if you had a 2-family dwelling unit, you'd need 4 acres. And I mean,
Right.
Instead of 2 acres. And I'm like, well, the appearance of the character doesn't really change. I think that the reason that it was that all of our zoning was originally like that was because we didn't have very robust wastewater, permitting and
Yeah.
regulations. So you wanted to make sure you had room without contaminating water supplies and stuff like that. But now, with permitting and specific standards and everything,
Eliminated a lot of that.
it's like you can't get a permit for too many units if it's going to contaminate a water supply. So if you're okay with having a 1-family or a principal residential building, a principal building on 2 acres, why should you really care
Yeah.
what's in it?
Yeah.
One dwelling unit, 2 dwelling units, 1 dwelling unit, and an accessory unit in a home occupation or whatever. It's on 2 acres. It's okay as long as it meets the requirements.
Yeah.
So that's what I wrote up in that highlighted part at the bottom, or tried to anyway. And again, I left the multifamily thing as for you guys to decide how many units you want in a multifamily and the R2. That's RR2. I only also did
Okay.
RR1. It's just so you don't worry. And the RR1 will probably go quicker because
Okay.
it's similar to RR2.
Sure.
in a lot of ways.
Let's keep going.
Okay, so again, I shortened down the purpose section a little bit, and the focus here being to provide an opportunity for a mix of residential, commercial, and public uses at moderate density while preserving the character and scenic qualities of the area. Also intended to provide a transition area between the village district and the rural residential 2 district, and may include limited extensions of the municipal sewer system.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, all sentiments that were expressed in your existing statement, but boiled down a little bit. And then again, take out the section about uses not requiring a permit, because we're going to create just one section to deal with that. And then same categories of uses, permitted uses,
Yeah.
no site plan review required. The first, well, all 7 of those are basically the same.
Yep.
So those are all things the zoning administrator can just sign off on. And then site plan
And
review required.
Would
Yeah.
would you tend, when writing it up, to simply say the same as RR2, reference that section, or would you reiterate it
I'd
here?
probably reiterate it.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, I honestly think we're gonna save a lot of pages in this
Uh-huh.
thing just by tightening up the language and
Mhm.
getting rid
Right.
of sections
Yeah.
we don't need.
Uh-huh.
So I don't think it's gonna get any longer.
Uh-huh.
And I kinda like, you know,
Everything of
You're never
R,
you know,
R1
if it's
is
in this
one place.
district, I'm gonna go look there and there it is,
Is, yeah,
rather
okay,
than
yeah,
bounce around.
uh-huh.
So,
User friendly.
Yeah.
I hope so, more so anyway.
Well,
I realize this stuff kind of reads like
That's the goal.
reads like Greek. So permitted uses, site plan review required. So here's where again some of those limitations come into play. State or municipally owned and operated buildings and facilities,
Yep.
cemeteries. And again, so this RR1 is, you guys know, I mean it's next to your village district and next to the commercial district
Right.
in places. So it's that transitional zone. So you probably have more of a mix of uses in general. The child care facility, the community care home with 6+ and 8+, and then the more robust home occupations again. And then same thing with the inn and bed and breakfast. About with the number of bedrooms, limiting that. Garden center, plant nursery, and then multifamily dwelling. And you've got the same language as in your bylaw now on multifamily dwellings about the conversions. So again, I'm
Be consistent.
well, and I don't want to, I don't want to tell you guys it's wrong or bad to have that only apply to
Conversions.
conversions.
Mhm.
That's just my experience.
Mhm.
That it gets a little bit messy,
Mhm.
but so that's definitely one to talk about.
Okay.
So okay, now in the conditional uses, okay, controversy, right? No controversy.
Okay.
So right now, in this district, you've got lots of now. This is kind of like a transitional district
Right.
from the village and commercial, but it's like I looked at maps and it's almost all off of town highways, like secondary roads.
Sure.
It's not along the state highways, or
They're small strips, like
Yeah.
along 346, I think.
Yeah, well, yeah, you know, so 346 and 7, and so, you know, you got the section 5.2.4.1 that's kind of open-ended about,
What
you
can
know,
go there?
retail, food stores, restaurants, barbers, you know, auto filling stations, repair shops, eating establishments, banks, office uses, and then it's got a whole bunch of provisions and restrictions and standards on that. And you, that's okay. You know, I mean, you know, again, it's not a really big district, so it's kind of limiting. But you know, it's
What are you getting at? You think it's too much?
well, my what I'm getting at, I guess, is just like from a you know from a land use planning standard is like if you want to try to create like a more of a real mixed use district, then if you be a little bit more limiting, so those things go a little closer to each other, it creates more of that potential for you know keeping those things closer. You know, at the same time, I kind of like you know a lot of the new thoughts in land use planning is to focus more on the appearance and the character as opposed to the use. So I'm kind of pulled in both directions.
Right.
But you know, if you start, you know, having to put all sorts of restrictions and standards, and you know, you can do this, but you can't do that, but you can do this, or you can't do that in this district. You know, I'd be more like, well, let it happen in the village, the commercial, the industrial,
Right.
with a lot
And
fewer
restrict
restrictions.
village more.
Yeah, more of real, you know, village commercial activity center, and in the rural residential, you know, just have kind of the lighter duty
Right.
commercial uses and mixed uses. But that's
So what kind of language do we need to differentiate?
well, I mean, the easy option is to just take those out of the R1. If you keep it in there, then, and I didn't pull any of that language in, but if you keep it in there, then I'd probably just generalize the uses a little bit more instead of trying to list, you know, barber shops, beauty shops, antique shop, gift shops. I'd probably just say, you know, like light commercial uses, limited to, you know, certain square footage or something like that.
A natural place because it's gonna follow the water and the septic, as you say, 346. I mean, there's the areas, the small places, but prior to that, there was never any sewage or water.
Okay.
Now there is,
Yeah.
so there's a potential for
Okay,
people
so that's R1 down along there?
turning out 346,
That's right.
going out to North Pownal.
Oh, okay. All right. So I mean, maybe you want to keep that in, and then just kind of, if you think it's okay. I mean, it's up to you. Either way you want to go, but just kind of. I think I just kind of try to generalize the language a little bit about the kind of use.
But just so I understand, you're thinking we're kind of blurring the lines between R1 and village.
Yeah, I mean, you know you know, like you know, for so long that you know, Vermont planning mantra has been, you know, distinct villages with a clear boundary to the you know to the more rural areas, but I think there has to be some kind of a transition. So the transition that I envision is more of a higher density residential light mixed use thing, as opposed to just letting the you know retails and restaurants and stuff spill over into that area.
Sure.
Because if you do that, and while there's on the face of it nothing really wrong with that, but you kind of reduce the probability that you'll get any kind of a compact center. You know,
Right.
I mean, because if you know if you say, you know, I mean, you have a lot of area in your village. It's pretty big. But if you say, okay, you have to go in the village if you want to have you know, retail stores, restaurants, barbershops, whatever, then you'll have more potential for creating that mixed-use walkable village than if you
Allow it to spread
allow
out.
it to spread down the highway.
And,
Right.
and you also have the businesses helping each other then, because you're now,
Yeah,
you went to the barber shop and now you're proximate to a store.
well, and
then-
it makes, yeah, so
Yeah.
you could do like, a, you know, like a little, you know, parking lot and everybody. I mean, it's maybe an idealized vision of, you know, what a village center could be, but,
It's kind of a mess anyway.
I
And
guess.
we have some unique challenges here in Pownal as to how we're
Yeah.
spread out anyway. That's
Yeah.
part
Who
of
wants
it.
to come here? That's what we need
Even
to
with
ask.
not confuse it with village designation, but, you know, I mean, that was a challenge to look at those 3 areas, and
Well, and you know,
most
the
of it
village,
was approved and
the
some of it
village,
wasn't.
the village designations, you know, that's kind of a reflection of that compact.
Sure.
Because like the state downtown board that approves those village designations, they are really all about
Yeah.
Yeah.
compact. You know,
Yeah.
we've argued with them that they're unrealistic nuts
5-story buildings,
about those things.
retail downstairs,
Yeah, and then they
professional next, residential on top.
Yeah, I mean, and that's all great, you know. But in some places, there's
Which
like
don't.
even where there's, you know, existing buildings that aren't historic, but they're commercial mixed-use buildings. They say nope, it's
Yeah.
200 feet down the road and it's not
Right.
historic, so it's not
Oh,
part of.
man.
But we say, but it functions as part of the village, you know. So yeah, so they take it to an extreme, but that's a reflection of that idea of trying to encourage that
Right,
compactness.
all in that one spot, right.
But again, you know, it's funny because, you know, like we brought in, you know, 2 speakers this last year, right? Joe Minicozy,
Yeah,
right?
it was
So
great.
he was all about piling stuff on top of each other, right? And you know,
Tax efficiency.
yeah, you know, and the other guy, Randall Aaron, you know, who was talking on the subject of form-based code, still likes that idea in general, but, you know, he was talking much more specifically about what it looks like
Yeah.
and how it functions, regardless of where it is. So, you know, it's like pick your school of
I-
thought.
Highly recommend.
It's all abstract.
Randall is on Cat TV. You guys recorded that. I don't
Yeah.
think Joe was recorded up at your annual meeting. I recommend everybody go and watch Randall's talk that night. It was fascinating.
Lots of pictures. So anyway, that's. I mean, I don't know how you want to handle like the discussion.
blurring of the
part it.
lines?
Well, and just in general, you know, like I raise a bunch of questions, and I don't, you know, I mean, unrealistic to expect you guys to just sit here and resolve it all tonight. but,
Right, right. I
Um,
think it bears a lot more discussion, but
yeah.
I'm thinking we don't want to necessarily go that route of jamming everything in one little spot, but we also don't want to make the mistake of having that kind of sprawl down the highway either. So there has to be a middle of the road.
Well, I
here
mean,
somehow.
I think you kind of tried to do it in the bylaw as it is, you know.
Yeah,
It says the shop or store shall not exceed the square feet specified in section, you know, that goes to the dimensional table
mhm,
for this district unless the shop or store occupies at least 2 stories in a building and at least 40% of the shop or store's gross floor area is contained on the 2nd floor, which is all good stuff. I mean, it's trying
Yeah.
to encourage the right form,
yeah.
you know, like, you know, mixed use, multiple story buildings, but it starts to get pretty complicated.
Yeah, well,
too.
you know,
Well,
when
that's the thing.
when you start to think of what exists here, let's take the guy trying to sell a hillside house. He's got a big spot there. He's got everything you say, but he doesn't have water, septic.
Yeah.
So you know, so what's here? Somebody with an imagination has to come here and see what works for them. The other person's going to put up the dough. They're going to,
Yeah.
can I make a living here? And all this stuff. You're going to say, well, wait a minute. I don't think I want to go there. You guys are tying my hands. If you want to buy the hillside house or people that exist here, there's plenty of places. That good place to make a buck. Pownal's a good town.
Yeah.
But it's, do I want to come here and take a shot and put up my money? And there's a better chance now.
So simplifying these bylaws would,
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely trying to
Just
simplify
open it
it,
up.
you know, and it's also, it's one of those things where, you know, some towns, I think, you know, make the mistake of just saying, well, we got to make it as easy as possible for anybody to come in and do anything. And I think, you know, you definitely want to be accommodating of business and entrepreneurship and investment, but at the same time, you want to maintain, you know, a certain level of quality and character.
Sure.
Otherwise, you know, it doesn't do anybody any good in the long run.
Yep.
So it's kind of like, how do you be as welcoming as possible without, you know, kind of creating an environment that's ultimately
Wild West.
not conducive to business. You know, I mean, if somebody comes in and does something that's, you know, really unattractive and disruptive, and then nobody will want to come in and move in next door to it.
They have an adult bookstore, okay?
I
Just give you
remember
one,
that.
which is now Stewart's.
You do remember
No,
that?
I mean,
I
yeah,
do.
the history of Pownal
One of the
is pretty
first things I
interesting.
saw when I drove into Bennington
Right,
County.
right where Stewart's is. Yeah, welcome
Literally.
to Pownal.
Blew up.
But, you know, we can tell the
Molotov
tales here.
cocktail.
But we can turn it
Through the
around.
window.
The ship is turning around slowly with a lot of things that have happened over the last
Because
30
you get all
years.
your pornography on the internet nowadays.
Well, I'm not even talking about
That's
that.
why we
I'm
went out of
talking about the
business.
sewage
Okay,
and
but moving right along here. Yeah.
There's nothing in here on adult bookstores.
No, there isn't.
I think
know
for
what,
that
I'll go ahead
reason,
and
we don't
Say
need it anymore.
Retail.
Right,
Open
it makes
free.
sense. I don't
It's
go
like
on the internet.
video stores. I'm not saying anybody in particular.
No, right.
So that's one to talk about, and you know, we can talk about
Nowadays.
Yeah.
if you want to go commercial uses in RR1, then what type of
What type?
limitations and things to put on it.
Light commercial, that type of thing.
Yeah, I mean,
right.
the language for the use is simple. Then I think it's just a question of trying to streamline the criteria
Size,
to make
density,
it simple.
Okay.
Oh, God.
Then conditional uses, a lot of the same types of things. Churches, I added churches and schools and stuff like that because those are limitations you have to allow. They seem like R1, village, commercial, that seems like the places where those would go. Same outdoor recreation stuff, same landscaping business. I put mobile home parks in here too. I think I probably got that. I don't know. I think I maybe got that from your bylaw. And then the mining stuff. And then again, I just took the table, the standards out of that big huge table
Right.
and just created a separate table.
Yep.
And I did the same thing with the density. You know, as far as the two-family or mixed-use
Sure.
buildings with the bottom. So that's as far as I went with it because I figured that would probably be sensory overload
Right.
Yeah.
for today.
Good
Yeah.
I was fully prepared to go till midnight tonight. But, you know, no, I think a lot of food for thought there, but
So I mean, I don't know how you want to
Okay, so-
approach it. If you want to talk about it for a while tonight, or if you guys want to take it back and work it over, and then come back at the next meeting with some specific ideas for the, you know, the density, the multifamily, the commercial uses,
Regarding
the
R1 and-
occupation questions.
would we have to look at village in the same sense? I mean, we have to look at them side by side to figure out density in R1, density in village. So everybody understand what the issue is as far, or the potential issue about this thing kind of spreading out in R1 and having the wrong type of commercial operations in it, when we should probably restrict it a little bit more toward village than R1. Do we need to go back over the next 3 weeks and kind of hash this out ourselves and get back together with Jim next time for that one section? Or do you want him to do what he's been doing, take our discussion tonight, his recommendations, and put together a draft so that
That's
we
what
could,
I would like to do it that way.
Yeah.
so that we could look at
I
it.
can put together a draft and
Yeah.
leave all the
Yeah.
those sections I think there's still
Right.
questions on
Because
highlighted.
Yeah.
even if we don't get to that until after the village discussion,
Mhm.
then we have the two side by side in
Then we
draft
look at it.
form to look at,
Okay.
to then really figure out how to prevent that or leave it alone. So,
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you might wind up, restricting it by default, if you have standards that are so restrictive in the RR1, then somebody
Enforce them
says,
in the
well, I
village.
don't wanna,
yeah,
I mean, it's like, it's an interesting notion that in the RR1, you would have a standard that basically requires 2-story, commercial buildings, which probably almost nobody would wanna build now.
right, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, if they did, it would probably want to build it more in the center.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Right.
so maybe you're already restricting.
What would you
it.
let me do if I bought the moccasin place?
If you what?
If I bought the moccasin place down the road here,
Yeah.
what would you let me do with that? It's in the wetlands.
What?
Well, that's a whole
No,
different.
no, I mean, but
Wait,
this
wait.
is common sense.
It's got city sewer though.
We
It does,
need
okay.
Batcher in there for that, right?
All right, all right.
It's got city sewer, so it ain't dumping sewer in the wetlands, supposedly.
Okay.
I don't know where the water's coming from.
I don't know either. I just
Probably
say
Well, I
that.
say-
Don't ask, don't tell.
I say, Jim, if you're gonna buy it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Okay.
Don't wait till after we change
Open that
it.
adult bookstore
That's right.
When I was younger.
On the
man.
second floor.
on the second floor.
Okay, don't dig in the cellar.
All right.
All right. So what I'll do is I'll put this together in a draft form, renumbered,
Okay.
and with the open questions highlighted, and then I'll make notes on all the rest of the districts. So I don't know if we'll get through the whole discussion
Well, and
next
even
meeting, but
even different from this, if you want to take some, I'll call it artistic liberty. If you want to change something that we discussed tonight and say, "How's this feel, guys?" Do
Okay.
something like that.
I'll make sure anything I change I'll highlight
Yeah.
so
Right.
that you can see
There were a
it.
couple of places where I think we reached agreement that get rid of it, move it out of there.
Oh, he did.
Yeah.
Also, in his email, in Jim's last email, he's got the first 4 sections in draft form,
Yeah.
and they're about 20 pages fewer than our first 4 sections of our current one.
Yeah, wait, see, I was looking at this. I think the next 30 pages, I think I can get it down to 10.
All right.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Alright.
It's all about efficiency. Imagine that. I know when people come in here, they're really going to miss going through that matrix and going from one
Yeah.
section to the other to the other.
They're gonna miss
But you
it.
can do this here, but you can't do it here. Yeah.
Yeah, I can figure it out. So,
Yeah,
all right,
that'd
no,
be
I
tough.
will. I'll work
Beautiful.
on that, and I'll try to send that out.
Yeah.
When is the next meeting, by the way?
Third Tuesday of September, so that would be.
I'll
And a good lawyer will come in and blow it all up.
17th?
They do.
17th. Yeah.
What do you
September.
I see a good lawyer.
Is everybody, are you okay now on emails, Jim? As far as,
I
is
think,
everybody
you know,
getting his?
Mine's not working yet.
I had a problem with, I've discovered with Rosemary, and then one or two bounced back, but I resent them to the alternate email address, and
Yeah, the alias. Is that what he
I don't
calls
know,
it?
I got confused. So my strategy now is to send it out to the group list I have,
Yeah.
and then anything that bounces back,
Then you
I
go to
send
the
it
second.
to the second one.
Yeah, with the underscore in it. And,
Yeah, except if nobody ever gets them, and it doesn't bounce back, then I
Should
don't
we
know.
just send you a
An
note
acknowledgement.
received?
Yeah, maybe that'd be good. If you can, maybe that'd be
Yeah.
a good idea.
Just very simple, got it,
I received
thanks.
Thank you. All right. I just gotta. Oh, look at that. I've got meetings every night that week now. That's good.
Lucky
We're
you.
glad to help.
That's
Yeah.
okay. By the end of the week, I get to go to Montreal. It's my wife's running the marathon, so.
Oh, cool,
So I will
Montreal Marathon.
Earn my
Good one.
my
Vacation.
weekend away, and I don't have to run it. I just have to watch.
Uh-huh.
So-
That's even better, right?
Okay.
Well, thank you, Jim.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else have any questions or,
Mike, what was, you were saying you recommend us watching on Cat TV?
yeah, what's his name?
Oh, Randall Aaron?
Randall Aaron.
Yeah.
How do you spell it?
Sid had heard him speak several times, I think.
Yeah,
Do you have
he
the
did
link
this
Wait.
circuit.
I'll get it.
Well, I'm not sure if it's on our website. Maybe. It's
It may be, but it is, if you go to Cat TV and put his
Cat-
name in, that should
Cat
come
TV,
up.
Okay.
Randall,
how do you
and
spell
how do you
the
spell
last
his
name?
name?
Lee, A-R-E-N-D-T, is a presentation on
A-R-E-N-D-T.
form-based design,
Aaron, E-N-D-T.
form-based codes. It's all the rage nowadays.
And if Joe, what's Joe's last name?
Joe Minicosi.
If that's recorded anywhere, that is must watch. The guy was phenomenal.
Yeah, he was really,
I know.
really good.
You could take, he was talking about Asheville, North Carolina, and how they changed that tax base around by efficiency in zoning and building, where retail on the first floor, professional space on the second floor, living space. And the tax revenue driven from that per acre
Uh-huh,
compared to a big box store that they have a couple of,
uh-huh.
it's like 30 times more efficient.
Wow.
It was stunning to hear him break that
You're
down.
like a little country store with a couple apartments above it
Uh-huh.
is much better for the town.
Far better
Oh,
Everybody
than getting a
wants to
big,
go to
Less
Asheville.
than
traffic.
getting even a big employer
Everybody
in.
wants to go to Asheville.
Yeah.
So nobody, yeah,
Yeah,
except Yogi Berra, hardly anybody goes there anymore, they're too busy.
yeah.
The Vanderbilt mansions.
Man,
Yeah.
well, that's what I'm trying to bring is the money.
It's too
The business.
crowded.
Okay, that was Tavern on the Green Yogi was talking about. Nobody goes there anymore, it's too crowded. All right,
Okay.
if we just have a couple more items. Jim, you're all set?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
All right, we've already gone over the minutes. We didn't need any public comment tonight. We reviewed section 5. I have no other business unless anybody else does.
Do you have any mail?
No. We gotta go through the mail, and there's no mail. So motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, we got a lot of those. Let's say Rosemarie motioned and
I'll second.
Michelle seconded. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor of saying good night. Good night.
Okay.
Thank you all.